wanted to hop on here and do a little mini training. This is something that I want to talk about because the confusion around it is creating so much unnecessary bickering in the spiritual community, and people thinking, no, I'm right, no, you're right, just all of this duality clashing. I think that there's a lot of miscommunications and myths even, and real issues with the information inside of the Starseed community. Hey everybody joining. So I want to just clear this up and do a little mini training on this. It's going to blow your mind and really help you to understand yourself so much better as a Starseed, okay? So I want to talk about your Descension story, okay? Because it's just as important as your Ascension story, maybe more important, and people just don't get it. And I am very inspired today to share this from a beautiful client session I just had inside of Sovereign Creator Codex, which is my Starseed mentorship. So if you want to have these kinds of experiences, come on into my Starseed mentorship. So I was with a client and we were talking about his Descension story. And his Descension story is so beautiful. And I'm obviously going to, I want you to visualize yourself in this, but I want to give you kind of some of these details. So just let's go right into it, okay? So the first thing that happens, okay, you are a part of Source. You are bathing in God's Source. You're not an individual soul, yet you are Source, bathing in that light, bathing in that bliss and in that harmony. And then there's this little spark of curiosity in your mind, right? In your, you don't have a mind yet, a little spark of curiosity that just evolves in this mix of Source. Little, think of it as a flash of light. It's curiosity, okay? That's a very first piece of you, which is so cool. So this curiosity flashes, and attached to the curiosity is, I wonder what it would be like to experience this or experience that or feel this feeling or feel that. There's something that has awakened you from this bath of bliss into curiosity. And you need to, and that's where bath of God's Source, little individual soul just formed. You are a spark of curiosity. Okay, so that's the very beginnings of you. So now what happens next? This little individual soul leaves, this little tiny circle, leaves the larger God Source bath and becomes an individual with your own personality, your own ability to plan incarnations, lifetimes with soul contracts, your own ability to be the master of your own life and have all these experiences. And the first thing that you would choose to do is do this kind of parallel move into having a lifetime as an angel, right? There's many dimensions of angels, but you would make a parallel move into one of the angelic realms. No one goes from Source to earth. You would not survive it. You would not survive it. How can you go from being bliss to, you would just crack, you would just crumble, you would not even exist. You go across to this angelic space. So what does the angelic realms look like? Seraphim, cherubim, healer angels, archangels. So we can spend some time in here getting used to just being an individual soul, just having a personality, just having curiosity. It takes time to just even understand that even that might be a shock to your soul. So then you slowly start to descend. We move down through the angelic realms. And then when you start to feel a little braver and you've had a few lifetimes, yes, angels are incarnations. They have a beginning and an end. If you choose to be an angel, you have soul contracts with a beginning and an end. They are not the pure soul that just goes on and on forever. They're still playing a character. Every time you are in an incarnation, you are playing a character that you've drafted inside of your soul contracts. Back to the story. You're in the angelic realms, right? You start to get a little braver. Oh, maybe I'm ready to, what's below this? Let's go down a little. Okay, now I'm an Arcturian. 11, 10th dimensional, maybe Arcturian. Still pretty high vibrational. But now I'm on a descension journey on the way down to where we find ourselves, Earth, right? The beginning of your story is a descension. And your soul journey is a circle, it's a cycle. So this half is you descending down from God's source, having that little moment of curiosity, becoming a soul, and then descending down through the realms, because you're already at the top. There's nowhere higher to go. It is a descension at the beginning, right? So if we want to descend down, we get to decide, how deep am I willing to go? Because I know you think Earth is hard, and she's an advanced school, but there's lower. There's 2D, which is right below Earth. There's 1D. There's 0D, which is the underworld. Do you want to know the difference? Here on Earth, you have to meet your shadows through the voice in your mind, like your ego mind is giving your shadows a voice to constantly judge and narrate you and make your life awful until you integrate that. If you go lower than Earth, like 2D, 1D, 0D, you don't just give your shadows a voice, you become the shadows. You become the dark entity. You become the shadow self. So maybe that might just flip on your head your beliefs about the underworld, that they're not all these evil beings, that they are like souls trying to master things, trying to master powerful lessons about becoming the shadow, because we're all part shadow and we're all part light. Are you willing? The lower you descend, the more your light you give up. And not forever. It's not forever. You're not giving it up forever. You're just saying, okay, let me do this lifetime with half and half, right? Half amount of light, half amount of shadow. Where would that place you? Probably like 5D-ish, maybe 6D, right? Half and half. But we're in 3D. So you're like 75% shadow, maybe 70% shadow. It's a lot of shadow here. But what if you go even lower? You're like 99% shadow. You're always going to have a little bit of light, right? So you're on a descension path, right? So here's the weird thing about what people believe that is not true. They believe if you have a higher dimensional life, again, let's just keep using Arcturian as an example because it's easy. I'm seeing myself in my Akashic records. Oh my God, I uncovered an Arcturian lifetime. Wait a minute. Why is there all this trauma? Wait a minute, I was killed? Or wait a minute, someone betrayed me? How is that possible in the higher dimensions? Oh, because depending on if you're on a descension path or the ascension path, your Arcturian experience could look very different, right? Very, very different. So if you are on the descension part of your cycle, all of these higher dimensional lives have to give you a little hit, just a little something, just to lower your frequency a little bit each time. Or maybe you're a brave soul and you get something really bad, like being killed, right? That's going to lower your frequency, and that allows you to continue descending. That's what trauma does. That's how it's a gift. That's how it's a lesson. That's how it's part of our sacred journey, is we can't descend without that. You can't just desire to descend. That's not it. It's the main frequency of the soul that determines where you can incarnate. You might get some choices and then your soul contracts you get to choose, but you have to experience things that cause you to descend, right? Otherwise, you can't understand that realm. You can't move down if you can't understand it. You can't live it. You can't be it. Okay? I have a comment here. Can I say I have been working on clearing the heaviness from 2D or below? Yay! Soul retrievals, right? So it's not about these higher dimensional beings that are your spirit guides have perfect lives. It's not about how your memories of being a Pleiadian must be amazing or a mantis being or whatever. It really depends on if you're on the descension half, which is half of your journey. That's so much of your journey. Okay, so what are the two halves? The descension, what's the point, right? We're descending through difficult lessons to meet ourselves in more and more advanced ways, in deeper, more shadowy ways. We're seeing our shadows. We're understanding that half of ourselves, yin and yang, right? So we have to descend down. We have to experience trauma. We have to experience grief. We have to experience loss. We're descending, okay? It's so important that we let that occur and that we live through that and that we experience that, right? How do we descend? We experience something that hits the frequency enough to bring it down. Okay, on this side, Now you're on an ascension path. You all are. If you're on Earth right now, you're on an ascension path, because Earth, the planet, is ascending. So I can just tell you, you can relax. You're on an ascension path right now. But how low did you go? Did you go below Earth? Like how many lifetimes have you been trapped on Earth? How's your ascension going? Because that's a whole other thing, right? On this half, the ascension side of things, we're rising now. How do we rise? We heal back to wholeness all the way back up, right? How do we heal back to wholeness? What's the spark of the moment that creates it? Because remember, when you were in the God Source bath, the little spark of what made you you was curiosity. What is the spark that creates the ascension? If trauma creates descension, and then you go as low as you're willing to go, and then you're like, as a soul, okay, whoa, I've gone as low as I can go. I'm ready to ascend. How do you start ascending? What if you were so brave that you ended up in the underworld, 0D, and then you're in your soul contracts, you're in the underworld, you're planning this life, or you're in the life. What is the moment when the ascension begins? And how do you do it over and over and over again to rise back up through 0D, 1D, 2D, 3? Does anyone know? How do we create the ascension? There's a moment. It can be a millisecond, but there has to be a moment where you remember who you really are. Okay? Maybe some people feel like that's really difficult to do here on Earth, and that's why the awakening part, the awakened souls are the minority, but you just go ahead and try and do that in the underworld. Like, you think it's hard here. It's so hard in the underworld. The underworld that I have seen and done soul retrievals for people is like, it's a place of forgetting. It's just forgetting. You forget who you are. You forget what you're doing. You're gone. You're just gone. And you're just on this, people just walk in circles. People just get lost in the dark forest. You're gone. Something has to happen. Even if it's a millisecond where you're like, oh, like I know where I am and I know who I am. Even if it's for a second, how does that happen in the underworld? Well, some people just have a very strong soul flame, and they can put triggers into their soul contracts that would create that moment, like something in the underworld that reminds them of something, a certain tree or a certain something. Other times it's the archangels. Back to my session with my client today, where I saw that when he was an archangel, he was working to like a spiritual warrior in a way, to go into the lower realms, lower than Earth, right? Into these underworld 2D, 1D realms, and create that spark of awakening for people so that souls didn't get trapped down there. Because a lot of souls, take on more than they take on these big challenges, and then maybe it gets too hard, like your eyes are bigger than your stomach. When you take too big of a plate of food, well, you're right in your soul contract. You're like, no, I can do it. And then you get down there and you're gone. But the archangels specifically, not just any angel, archangels are a huge part of the spark of awakening for people. And I saw this vision of him standing in a space of just pure dark, and he was the only light, right? And he's bringing that, like snapping the fingers in front of somebody with the divine light of the archangel. Wake up, Samantha, wake up. And she might not see him because maybe that's really hard, but has that moment of like, what am I doing, right? As soon as you have that moment in the underworld or in any of the lower realms, your own personal angels would swoop in. They're waiting for you to have that moment, because you can't see them until you have it. You can't communicate with them. They can't communicate with you. But that moment is like, and then they swoop in, cross you over, time to go. Remember who you are. Let's go. Before that moment fades, they've got to get you to cross over. Because as soon as you cross over, you can do a different life, right? Like, okay, we woke up in the underworld. What's next? Okay, 2D. Okay, let's do it again. 1D, 0D. We're going up. 1D, 2D, then 3D, Earth. Here we are on Earth, right? We're not that much higher than the underworld. So that just goes to show you how masterful the souls are in the lower realms. That just goes to show you how important your descension story is. I'll get to your questions in just one sec. That just goes to show you, something else. Here's what it can show you too. How are demonic entities created? There's two ways that I can share with you. The story that I just shared with you, but no amount of waking them up works. And then they don't know who they really are, so they start believing that the darkness is who they are. And then whatever got them to the darkness, remember, it's traumas that bring us down to these low places, is so fixated in their mind. So maybe they start fixating on revenge, or they start fixating on violence, or they start fixating on just twisted energies. And they can't have that remembrance because they're intentionally choosing to go deeper into the dark and into the shadows. That's how a demonic being gets created, because if you spend too much time in these lower realms, you become a demon. Another very interesting way that a demonic being is created is, so if a soul dies here on Earth and they don't cross over, they become a ghost, right? We can all agree, yeah, a soul that doesn't cross over is a ghost, right? Well, if the ghost lingers for too long, because I've never met a happy ghost, if they're sticking around and they don't cross over, it's because of a lot of lower energies. Grief, sadness, anger, betrayal, I mean, all these reasons, fear, are reasons why souls do not cross over. If they don't cross over and they just hang around for too long, the ghost stops being this effervescent orb, kind of energetic see-through, like orb, and it starts becoming this like black, sticky, goopy energy, and it starts to sink and sink, and then it goes from 4D, which is where ghosts are, down to 2D, 1D, and if a ghost stays like that for long enough, it sinks down, it becomes a dark entity. And then if it stays like that for even longer, it does become a demonic entity. So there's a couple of ways that this happens, but it's all underneath. The dark entity underneath the demon is the original soul still, right? Is that soul that was just trying to be brave, trying to do their soul lessons, trying to do their descension part of this path, and experiencing traumas to help them descend down before they began the ascension journey of healing back to wholeness, rising up, and the remembrance of who they really are. So that is why it is proven that the most powerful way to clear demonic entities and dark entities is with helping them remember who they really are. Which, I don't know if you've had to work with demons, done soul retrievals. I've had to do some of this work. And when you remind them of who they really are, even as a demon, they have that moment like, oh, especially if you have their name, right? Especially if you see in the Akashic records, the name of the soul, in the lifetime right before they sunk, like maybe they were in ancient Egypt, shout out ancient Egypt. I've got some ancient Egypt goddess earrings on. Maybe they were in ancient Egypt and they, were betrayed and killed, murdered, right? And then they didn't cross over, and then they sink down, 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 down. The name that they had in ancient Egypt is the most helpful way to wake them up, right? To use that and be like, hey, I know who you are. I know what happened. And it's not right that happened, and I'm so sorry that happened to you, but it's time for you to rise now. You've put in the time. You've been in the goop. You've been in this darkness for too long. It's time to get your power back. Let's start to rise, and then we can encourage them to cross over, and then we can reclaim that soul, and that's a soul retrieval too. I mean, there's other ways to do soul retrievals, but all right, looks like I have a ton of questions, so good. Let me just see. I'll go back a ways and see what happened. What happened? I don't know how far I am. How do I find out? Oh, well, you can... if you're not a channeler, then you can, work with somebody like me that can help you to find out. What you need access to is your soul contracts, right? So somebody that can help you access soul contracts, or maybe Akashic records. I usually use soul contracts for this though. Can you explain about soul retrieval? Yes. So soul retrieval is, if you can't remember, so a couple of places where soul retrieval happens. If the soul itself descends down so far and can't have that moment of awakening, and then it stays down there, and then we need to retrieve that part of us. Or sometimes, this has happened to me in this life, sometimes you can have something so traumatic happen to you that it's so painful that it causes like a shattering or a splintering of the soul, and a soul shard goes off on its own, right? And this soul shard can get lodged into locations. So the place where the trauma happened, and it can be left behind there. It's kind of like PTSD of the soul. So PTSD in the mind is kind of when the mind shatters and it starts to take pieces of your memories and put them away. Like, ooh, you can't see that or you're going to flip out. So then we have regressed memories. It's sort of like that with the soul, where like the piece of what happened and all the memories attached to that, like, whoa, you're not ready to heal this. Let me just put this over here for you. And when you're ready, you'll naturally be brought back in alignment with that to retrieve it. So you can retrieve soul shards. If they're on this realm, like in an earth space, like I've retrieved a soul shard from Sedona before, a couple of different places, I feel like. If you retrieve it on this level, then when you retrieve it, it goes back into your high heart, because that's where the soul is in the body. So in your body, your soul needs to sit somewhere. It sits in the high heart, below the throat, above the heart, right in the high heart. Your soul's there. So you'd place it back in there and it would reintegrate with the soul. But if the soul shard is in a lower realm, like 2D, 1D, 0D, it's not safe to put that back in your body. You then just cross that over into the light. And then when you pass away, you'll be rejoined with it, but it won't hold you back because it's not in the lower realms anymore. It's like waiting for you in heaven, essentially. Awesome. When we lost everything and we choose to accept it, but while having a white feeling, that feels peaceful. I don't know what that means. Okay. I would guess that moment was when you finish all the resisting and allow nature of source love to inspire people to ascend, triggered into relaxation, so to say. In the lower realms, that moment of like, I understand what you're saying, but there isn't really so much of that source love in the underworld. Like, there's barely any light down there at all. It is a place of darkness, as it's supposed to be, right? We have higher realms that are places of almost all light, and then we have lower realms that are places of almost all darkness. Almost. There's always got to be a little bit of each to hold some kind of balance. But in the lower realm, you're not going to be feeling a whole lot of source love. So that's why a lot of the time archangels come and that's what an archangel does. Like, they are always on missions. They're not just helping humans. They are on missions into these lower realms so often to help people to have that moment of, oh, I remember who I am. Oh my God. And then they cross over, right? Good. Are we talking about humans on earth as demonic beings? No, we were talking about the underworld. This feeling is so peaceful and beautiful, and every time I have it, I feel so blessed and happy, but I feel like I can't keep it. How do I maintain it? That is like a completely different question than what we're talking about, so I don't want to, because that's a whole other thing. So the soul shards are stuck in space and time in a way. Yeah. So like my soul shard I had one stuck in Sedona, which was so random. And I, if you feel a calling to go to a certain location, that's a huge sign that there's energetic work for you to do there. So I felt very called, like if something's just on your mind, if you're dreaming about it, if every time you see it, you get a feeling or a flutter, you're meant to go there. There's energetic work for you there. Maybe soul retrievals, maybe activations, maybe codes, something, or maybe there's grid work for you to do, but you're always being called. And starseeds don't realize we're actually supposed to move around, right? That doesn't mean that you have to move over and over and over again, though I bet you have. Just like me. My childhood was just moving constantly. I've moved so much as an adult, but also it can just be traveling. Like if you go somewhere for a weekend, a week, whatever, you're also being called to those places. So really like take note when you feel called to a certain place and make sure that you go there. And when you're there, have a quiet moment in meditation where you're like, okay, I'm sitting in this part of the grid. What is here for me? And a lot of the times you can find soul shards doing that. Other times it's astral work. Right? If it's not in this dimension, we have to astrally go and get it. And if you are planning on doing soul retrievals in something lower than 3D, as in 2D, 1D, 0D, you really want to have someone that knows what they're doing join you. Like as in a professional, as in someone who knows they can protect you, who knows that it's going to be a successful journey, who knows that you're not going to just pick up entities and then bring them back to your body. Like, you don't want to be doing that as like a novice. You really want to make sure that you understand what you're doing for that. So anyway, I'm going to leave this here. I hope that this was insightful about your descension story. You have all had a descension story. Every single one of you that watches this and comes across this, even though you're on an ascension path now, it all began with the descension. It all began with this spark of curiosity of like, wait, what would it be like to not just be in a bath of floating source bliss? What would it be like to feel this emotion, to do that, to da. That was already descension, right? And there's nowhere to go but down when you're source. And then you have this beautiful, powerful experience of that half of your descension journey. And then when you've gone as low as you want to go, it's time for the ascension to begin. And then we start the ascension journey, which is so beautiful. Again, if you are on this timeline, you'll be able to watch this video. This timeline of Earth is an ascension timeline. Okay? Gaia herself is ascending through the precession cycle. So you are not on a descension anymore if you're able to even watch this video. Can you experience 0D, 1D, that in a current life? I felt like I was in purgatory for a while before I woke up to oneness. It's been a while, so I honestly don't know. Ooh, that sounds like maybe if you're even feeling that way, it sounds like maybe you have like pieces of self in that space that you were connecting to, right? So if you have versions of self or soul shards or something connected to you in 0D or 1D and they're able to connect to you, you're going to get strong feelings of that realm in the here and now. And it's really important for you to clear that up, heal that, bring it back up. We've got to bring it back up at least to 3D, right? Yeah. But there's also just the feeling that you're talking about of just being like asleep, right? Just so plugged in to the 3D programming that you're on autopilot like a robot and you're fully asleep. And a lot of that feels that way. And until you have your, like coming online with your soul comes into the body and you're able to think for yourself, then it could definitely feel that way. Good. Very good. Awesome. Okay. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to hop off and I'm going to repost this for y'all to enjoy. So thank you so much. Oh, and one last thing. If you want to do this work with me, just like my beautiful client from today that really inspired this little, I gave him this mini lesson in our session because he was the archangel in the underworld doing that wake up for the souls. So he really needed to understand it all. If you want to understand your own story and your own Akashic journey and your own soul contracts and your Star Nations Alliance, who are you here as an awakened starseed now? There's a whole other thing. You're on a mission. You're here to be a volunteer of the light. And so who are you here to represent? Who's your Star Nations Alliance up here that you're down here as the ground crew and now you're representing them? Everyone has a different combination of Star Nations Alliances. What are yours? That is directly related to what your soul gifts are, what your mission is, who your niche client is, what your path is, what your purpose is. So important for you to understand that. So if you want to, again, dive into these beautiful, deep soul contracts, Star Nations Alliances, Akashic records, ancestral patterns, all the things that we're doing inside of the Starseed mentorship, go and check it out in my link in bio. It's called Sovereign Creator Codex. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you soon.